Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Two Economists and a Lender, where we take that deep dive into the most important economic issues facing agriculture. I'm your host, Carly Jacobson. David Widmar and Brent Gloy are back here with us from Agricultural Economic Insights, along with Farm Credit's own Rebecca Wellenstein, to discuss strategies developing a marketing plan that will weather the storm. So today's topic is really going to hone in on the mindset required to build that durable marketing strategy. So, Brent, with that, how about you kick us off?
Thanks, Carly. Great to be back with everybody again this week or month, and talk about something I know is I think you could consider it a pain point for almost everybody, and that's developing and executing the marketing plan. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time today just trying to help give people some background and context on how to develop an effective marketing plan that will meet your needs. Now, when I say that marketing is kind of a pain point, I think we can all admit that marketing grain and livestock is complex. Okay, it's a very important decision, um, and it's can be complicated, and we have lots and lots of options. But more than that, there are three other factors I think that are really important. One is we get a lot of feedback. Marketing is one of those decisions that we get feedback constantly on it. So if you make a sale, the market is going to tell you every day, hey, the price is higher or lower than it was when you sold that. It gives you an update constantly. And I think that's one of the things that makes it difficult because we're given all that feedback, but sometimes I think if we don't take it correctly, it even complicates our decision making further. And what I would say is we want to ask ourselves anytime we get that market feedback, prices went up, I sold, prices went up, I shouldn't have sold. We really need to think about what are we evaluating? Are we evaluating the quality of that decision to sell or the outcome? And most of the time, I think we tend to focus on the outcomes. And when we do that, we're bound to be wrong an awful lot of the time. I think we really need to get back into that framework of let's focus on the quality of the decision. Did I weigh all the factors appropriately when I made that decision? Are there things I would have done differently? Was it a good decision given the information I have? Not worry as much about the relative price levels after that happened. The other thing that we get in marketing is a lot of commentary. You can drive down the road and listen to the farm radio station on the radio, and there'll be somebody on there every 30 minutes telling you what's happening in the market and giving you an explanation of why it's all happening. And it always reminds me of one of my favorite cartoons that I saw, which is a guy sitting in front of his evening financial news, watching it on TV. And he says, apparently, the commentator says, apparently everything that was good for the market yesterday was bad for it today. And I think that kind of sums up a lot of the quality of the commentary that we hear. There's a lot of explanations offered to explain what oftentimes are probably just small random price movements. So we tend to get sucked into that thinking that, oh, if we just had one more piece of information, we can know where that market is going. And that's a really hard thing to do. The other thing I think that we have to think about in developing those marketing plans is trying to balance our goals. Okay. Are we interested in, just getting the highest price? If that's our goal, that's going to be a very hard one to achieve. Long term, we've got a lot of other issues in our business that we have to think about. What's the cash flow needs for our business? At what price levels can my business cash flow? At what price levels is my business profitable? Okay. Then we also have logistical issues. So when do I have to have grain moved out of my facilities or out of my field? How much room do I have for it in my storage system? So a lot of things we have to balance, and all in the context of the broader risk management of our farm, which involves things like crop insurance as well. So there's a lot of things here that make this complex and sometimes I think difficult. One example of this is that things can change really fast in grain marketing. And here's the U.S. corn ending stocks to use ratio. And you see these two red dots on the right of your screen. As recently as May, okay, as recently as May, The USDA was thinking that we were going to have somewhere around 22% stocks to use ratio on corn. Today, that number is below 10%. Changed really, really fast, caught a lot of the experts by surprise. And what we have to do in our marketing plan is make sure that we can adapt our marketing plan to fit the changing conditions as well.
So Brent, I really like how you set this up, and it's marketing is oftentimes a lot of our hardest decisions because there's a lot of there's changing information. There's a lot of feedback from external, but also internal. So it's just a really hard, it's like all of our biases or all of our emotions sort of come together at this one point. And then this fourth point here is things can change, and they change really quickly. They have certainly in the last 12 months. And so the question is, how do you build an effective marketing plan that weathers that storm or the uncertainty or all the things that might be coming at it? And so as we're preparing for this, I was remembering this framework that Stephen Covey wrote about in his book, about highly effective people. It came out in the late 1980s, and he has a very good visualization that really sticks with me, and I think it's really applicable here. In his visualization, he had a big bucket that he needed to fill, and in that bucket, he had to put big rocks, gravel, some sand, and some water. And he goes through this analogy. Well, if you put the water in first, and then you put the sand in on next, and the gravel and then the big boulders, you're going to have a big mess, and it's all not going to fit. And it's all about how you put in different ideas or put in the priorities. And so he said, if you put them in the right way, you can get a lot more to fit, and you can get a lot more time in your day or a lot more information into the decision you're making. So he suggested you start with the big things, the boulders, and then the most dense objects that you have. And then you can come in with the small gravel, and they can work their way in between the big boulders. And then you can add the sand, which works its way even more. And then finally, the water finds all the little nooks and crannies, and it can fill itself up. So you can get a bucket that has a lot of content in it. I think that's really important for our marketing plans. We have to layer in different amounts of information, and we have to put them in the right way so that we can sort of get as much content in there as possible, but also we don't miss something. And so for today's conversation, we're going to talk about 3 types of information that should be included in your marketing plan, but also the decisions that you make about marketing. And so we have this idea, we're improvising on this idea about rocks, sand, and water, and how those are influencing your decision. So I'm going to explain these and set these up, and then Brent and I have a little bit of an example for you at the end of this. So the rocks, these are your business basics. I think these are the ones that are the easiest to overlook because, one, it's different for every organization, right? 2 farms across the street from each other are not going to have anywhere near the same business basics. You can't really compare apples to apples with your peers or at the coffee shop or with your trusted advisors. These are going to be very unique to you. The second thing is that makes it easy to overlook is these things. They're sort of already in your mind, in the back of your brain. And you don't think about putting these into your marketing plans, but in our opinion, it's really important to write these down. And so these are your cash flow obligations. You already know this, right? But you have to go get the files and you have to write it down, right? When exactly is this debt service obligation due? When exactly do I need these family living contributions? When exactly are my cash rent payments due? Other examples, grain storage and hauling logistics, right? How much capacity do you have? Do you need to sell some at harvest? Do you have some constraints about when you can ship your grain or haul your grain? Do you want to get it done before planting? Do you want to hold on to it through the summer so that way you can take care of it later in the season? Also, what are your goals and what are your initial budget projections? Get those captured. So, what are your costs of production? What are your break evens? But also, do you want to build your working capital? Do you want to build up some savings so you can maybe buy a piece of farmland down the road? And finally, do an inventory of the marketing tools you're comfortable with. As we get into the heat of the decision, which we'll talk about later, there's all these options, right? Well, let's narrow those down and let's think about what marketing tools do I have in my toolbox that I'm comfortable with? Do I want a forward contract? Do I want to use options? Can I use HTAs? All of those. What's available to me based on the partners that I have, and then what am I comfortable with given my experiences? And so don't overlook these business basics, the main boulders that you need to put in.
And David, I think this is a really important point in that these are the first things that should go on your plan. Because if we try and stick this stuff in at the end, after we've been making it our whole goal just to get the highest price and try and stick in our business goals, we're going to find that they probably aren't going to align. We want to start with these business basics and really take some time to think about, what are your budget projections? What are your profitability levels? What are those constraints that he talked about? Really, really important to start here.
And here's some secret sauce, right? If you spend the time to update these, they're probably going to be pretty darn relevant a year from now, and they're not going to change very much in the next 12 months. So if things completely change, maybe there's a big preventive planning scenario like we had 2 years ago, or there's a global pandemic like we had last year, these business basics, these boulders, aren't going to change all that much. And that's really valuable to you because you don't have to start all the way over, right? Your plans can be built off from this foundation. So let's go to the next level, the next density of information we should be adding into our business plan. We call this the SAN. These are your growing season updates. These are the things are going to change or evolve or iterate as you go through the growing season. So one, what marketing decisions have you made? We need to capture that in real time. I made this marketing decision to forward contract X number of bushels at this price going forward. The second point is update your production estimates. What did I get planted? How are the yields going? How is my storage availability looking? And then those two pieces sort of flow into the third piece, which are your budgets, right? Did you get your cost of production in at the same price that you initially budgeted, right? Did something change? Did you have to add another herbicide pass? Did you have to start watering maybe a little earlier than you planned? Did you need to buy some extra feed or extra hay for your livestock? And then the fourth is, these are some of these marketing goals or these rules of thumb that you tell yourself that you need to do. So you might be telling yourself, I want to get 25% of my grain forward contracted before July 15th, just to take care of, some of this market rally that might be coming my way, right? These are these rules of thumb that you might be working with. But these are things that you're going to layer in next because you're going to update these as the growing season unfolds. The third bucket here, or the third item we're going to add to our bucket are the water. It's the water. It's our current conditions. This is all the information that has a way of finding you, right? This is all the reports that the USDA comes out, all the conditions or the weather reports that we're following. These are our personal biases or our personal expectations, right? We have expectations about what the March prospective planning report's going to be or what the yields might be coming in at. And then there's also all the market prices and all the quotes. And there's sort of the broad market trends, right? There's what the Board of Trade's saying or what the deferred contracts are saying in the futures markets. But then there's also drilling down. This is what I could contract for harvest at. This is what option I have for my HTA, or what the prices are for some puts and calls, or maybe the futures that I actually want to go out and maybe buy. But think about the shelf life of this information, right? It's going to be very short. It's going to update very, very quickly. And some of these at the bottom, right? Those are going to update almost instantly. As soon as you look at the screen, it's going to update itself. And so we have to really think about this information is very important, but it changes very rapidly. And we have to make sure that we include it, but that our marketing plans aren't exclusively based on this third level of information, this water, these
Right.
current conditions.
Right, Dave. And I think this is one of the things that causes lots of frustrations with producers and farmers and even myself is we tend to focus on this water, and we're pouring all this water in, and pretty soon we've got a gigantic mess because we just get overwhelmed by the short-term movements in the market, and we're not going back to what were my overall goals? What were the rocks that I put in that jar? What were the overall goals that I had to meet and I needed to meet? And is my marketing plan achieving that? And too often, I think we get too trapped in the kind of current conditions that causes frustration, causes us to think we're doing a lousy job, or sometimes to think, oh man, I am a genius, in terms of where prices are going. So I think, when we think about this focus, we've got to always go back to those big boulders that we put in the jar to start with.
So Brent, let's get a little bit of an example here. So should I sell 10,000 bushel of corn this week, right? So if we think about, this is the question that we're trying to decide in our mind. Well, let's go through all of the bucket of information, the jar of information we have. Well, our rocks, the business basics. You need to sell 200,000 bushels at harvest because of the logistics of your operation. Second piece is the current price is profitable and allows you to meet the goals that you have. Now let's move into the sand or the growing season updates. You haven't sold any yet. Your goal is to get 50,000 before planting based on your rules of thumb and what you've sort of your secret sauce to your marketing plan. The second piece of sand information is your budgets haven't changed, right? You're still comfortable with these break evens. So finally, let's go to the water, right? The current conditions. You're bullish and you think prices could go higher. You've also looked at the basis here, and the bids aren't all that exciting, right? They're about average. Now, let's think about this, right? You should ask yourself, what would I do if I was in this situation? Well, if you only focused on the current conditions, right? If you were only looking at the current conditions, your decision jar only had water in it, you might not pull the trigger here because you're still bullish and you think about the basis. These are the types of conversations we might have at the coffee shop. But if you think about all the rocks and sand, you might look at this and say, hey, this is an opportunity here for me to meet those goals. I have to make a decision here and I have to do something at some point. And if you think about the rocks and sand, it starts to become a different conversation. I think this is really important, is that we can maybe sometimes move away from this chatter about the current conditions and we start to get down to the nuts and bolts of our specific operation, our specific needs.
Right. Focusing on those bigger picture goals is really, really important, because that water information always is tending to push us to either, usually to delay. And we can talk ourselves into that all the time. But if we go back to those basics, I think it will help us make better decisions.
So, we have a couple slides here left before we get Rebecca and our lender expert, but one of the real values of following this framework is what happens when things change. Things are going to change. Change is inevitable, right? You're going to make a plan and it's not going to work out. And that's a really frustration for a lot of us. But Dwight Eisenhower has a great quote. Of course, he has a lot of experience in had a lot of experience in making plans that didn't work out in real time. He said, the plans are worthless, but the planning is everything. And see this activity as an investment into your future decision-making process, right? See this as you investing in being able to make a better decision down the road because of this planning exercise. And we want to have a marketing plan that avoids needing to be a complete do-over, right? That needs to start over. And if we have one that's focused on those water categories, those will change rapidly. And also we need a plan that can be updated very quickly. So to sort of recap here, as we think about how you can use this, there's two ways we can use this, right? Is either making our current plans more resilient or starting from scratch and creating a new plan. And I think the first thing is really important is identify the rock, sand, and water in your plan. And my bias here is to highlight them, right? Because if you start highlighting them in the Word document, you can see the colors, right? You can see, oh, these are all the rocks, these are all the sand, these are all the water, and this is how this is playing out. You can find the gaps, okay? And then make sure you get all these things in, the business basics, the updates, and the water. And my preference here is to put them in that order, get the rocks in there first, because otherwise, when you get to the current conditions, it's going to be sort of a lot of loose trails, right? But we can really spend the time to get those rocks in.
I think that's just so important because, again, I keep coming back to it, and I did this in my growing on session this year was it a good decision or a bad decision to sell corn last July? And, everybody said, oh, it's a terrible decision, but and I knew that's probably what was going to happen because we all tend to focus on that outcome. That's more like the water. You need to evaluate in the context of the rocks in your business plan. Really build that up so that we can make good decisions.
So Brent, before we get to Rebecca, she's going to join next. I just want to challenge everyone. It's if you use this framework in your marketing plans, when you go to make a decision, you can ask yourself, what's impacting my decision today? Am I focused solely on the water, or am I using the rocks and the sand, right? Are my business basics and my growing season updates, how much are those impacting myself? And I think that can help us, that can insulate us a little bit from all the chaos that might be happening in the market at the time, right? How can we step away from that and really, I like to use that as an example. What information am I using in this decision? Am I using the water or the rocks? And I encourage you to think about that as well. So Rebecca is joining us. She's our lender expert. We had a lot of fun working with her on getting this presentation put together, and I'm excited to have her share her personal perspective. So Rebecca, again, thank you for joining us. And why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself? You have a few hats that you wear.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. So yeah, my husband and I have been married for over 10 years. We farm here in Southeast South Dakota. We have a row crop operation, cow-calf operation, and quite a few hogs on feed. So I jokingly call myself the hog boss, and also the marketing lady. So I am in the trenches with all of you as producers, and get to make sometimes what are great decisions and sometimes what aren't some great decisions, and get lovingly ribbed at home about sometimes when those decisions aren't the best.
So tell us a little bit about some of those less than optimal decisions. We won't call them bad, right? But maybe less than optimal decisions. And how do you think about that internally? And how do you navigate that as you're making a future decision?
You know, it's hard because I talk with producers every day, right, about making decisions and making good decisions and making them sound. But sometimes I find myself kind of letting that water take over too. In 2012, I remember I sold 5,000 bushels of corn before we started planting. Little did I know that before planting started, it was going to be the drought of 2012. And I remember being quite scared, not knowing if we were even going to get the 5,000 bushels I had marketed for that fall. So it was an opportunity cost that I gave up. I sold 5,000 for $3.50. We all know where it went in 2012. It was over $7. So yeah, it was, the outcome was not the best, but at the time it seemed like a really good decision.
It's kind of funny, right? Because you probably couldn't tell us what you did in 2011 or 2013, right? But you know crystal clear what you did in 2012. And 2020 is probably another year where we're going to remember for a decade or more exactly what we did and exactly how the market might have went another way.
Absolutely. Yes, I sold beans for $8.35. That was not very smart as well.
It's one of those things though too, Rebecca. I think that once you get that experience too, you can update those business basics a little bit better so that in the future, oh, this is the part of the decision that I maybe wasn't right. And you know, this is why crop insurance is really important, and all of those other things. So really help us update those business basics going forward.
Exactly. And like I tell all of my producers, you know, selling grain is really a game of averaging, right? Nobody's going to hit a home run. And anyone that tells you that they do is maybe not always telling you the full truth. You're making sales, you're making them often, and hopefully ending up with a good average.
That's a great piece of advice. Yeah. So let's think a little bit more about the marketing plans. What's a common mistake or maybe a misconception or something that's just flat out wrong that you see on a regular basis that you would like to sort of shed some light on and talk with us about today?
You know, I think the biggest thing is that producers are just oftentimes scared to make the wrong decision, scared about what other people will think of their decision. And I think they're also scared sometimes that they don't know and they're afraid to ask a question. So I think it's just finding someone that you feel that you can trust, who's going to really offer you an unbiased opinion. I think that's the biggest thing, is to find someone that you know will tell you, hey, you know what, try this. And I think that would be my biggest piece of advice would be try something, right? And try it on a small scale. Dip your toe in the water. Not to kind of use the analogy here, but you got to try something, right? Or you're always going to get the same results.
Yeah, I always remind myself that you can't edit a blank sheet of paper, right? You can't improve a marketing plan that doesn't exist, right? So you got to get something on paper, and then you can put it into action, and then you can make improvements on it the next year because you have something written. You can say, this is what I did, and this is how it turned out, and now I need to make some improvements. So you got to start somewhere. So I'm going to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about crop insurance. And one of the pieces of advice that, or rule of thumb, we hear a lot, and I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. Sell up to your crop insurance level. Can you explain a little bit about this, what it means, and maybe what happens when everything might turn out like a 2012 like event?
Absolutely. I think, everybody runs around saying, sell up to your guarantee, sell up to your guarantee. And we don't really know what that means until we get into a situation where we find out that we might actually have to find out what this is all about. Here I am, I don't have a crop. I sold up to my guarantee. I know I'm not going to produce it. Now what? So, a lot of advice that we give producers is the harvest price is going to be set in October. That's when we're watching that market. So that would be the time then to buy back the bushels if you're forced to buy them back. Every elevator is going to be different. Ethanol plants are going to work differently than your elevator. So it's also knowing what you've got yourself into. What kind of contracts do you have? Are they going to be contracts I have to deliver on, that I have to physically give them grain? Or are they a contract that I can roll if I decide to roll it? So I think, anytime you make any decision, you should probably always know, worst case scenario, what am I up against? So, but again, from a crop insurance standpoint, if you've got to buy back those bushels, you're going to want to buy them back when we're setting that harvest price, because crop insurance is always going to pay you on the higher of the two.
Right.
I think that's a really good thing to point out, Rebecca, because I think that advice is given a lot. And I always somewhat question it myself. I think to me, it feels very aggressive. But I've been in that same position that you were when you're not knowing whether you'll have anywhere close to enough stuff to deliver. And so you really start to get your spreadsheets out and figure out where you're at. It changes your perspective a little bit, I think.
If you could put one piece of advice on a billboard for thousands of producers to see across the country, what would you like that message to be here in March 2021?
Well, as cheesy as this sounds, David, I mean it with all my heart, and that's believe in yourself. And that can go for anything, right? Not just even marketing. I think so many farmers don't believe in what they are doing, and they are just kind of scanning the masses, seeing what everybody else is doing. And it's, believe in yourself. Believe that what you're doing is okay and that you're doing the right thing for your operation.
Great piece of advice. Yes. I think things like this marketing plan, right, are going to help you create a scorecard that allows you to be able to benchmark yourself, right? You just can't go to the coffee shop and compare prices to prices and feel good about your decisions. You're going to have to create a scorecard through this marketing plan that allows you to say, hey, I made this decision because it met the business basics and it met my growing season outlook and it met all my needs, not just sort of the water element, just that market chatter that we might get sucked into. Rebecca, I wanted to ask you about something that came up as we were preparing, and we kind of alluded to it. Can you tell us a little bit about, indecision or decision making? Can you just explain a little bit about that?
So I think, we kind of talked about this prior to, is that, even though when you don't make a decision, you're still making a decision. So inaction is really a decision. And even though I say, hey, I'm waiting, like right now, am I selling grain? Am I selling my 2021 crop? Not yet, but I'm making a decision. So I think that's where we just kind of get all balled up and thinking we're not doing anything. Well, we're still doing something.
Yeah, I like that a lot, because I often think we sometimes say the decision is, yes, I'm selling grain today, but we could flip that around a little bit and we actually say no a lot, right? So it's more like, should I sell today? It's like, oh, should I not sell today? If we flip that just a little bit, it might change how we think about that decision a little bit. No, I'm not going to sell today. No, I'm not going to sell today. Well, eventually you might actually start to sell some stuff. That's not directed at Brent. He was worried that indecision. He likes to use the pocket veto sometimes. So
I do. Well, let's get into a few of these questions. What % of our estimated yield should we have sold by harvest with a range?
Well, I think, one of the first things is back to your business basics, right? Do you have on-farm storage? And if you don't, then it's, that might be a very different equation for you than if someone who has lots of storage, right? And so that is one of those unique identifiers to your farm that might automatically start to impact that. I think that's why we have to work through these business basics and those growing season updates to help you. And then it gets back to your own internal rules of thumb. So I'll just start with that.
Yeah, and I would say, I think this is it's a question that is going to vary depending on the person. And what I was saying to Rebecca earlier is I often hear that we'll sell up to your crop insurance guarantee, and I never do that. It's really hard to sell that much for me, but it depends on the situation. What I will tell you is, like, this year, one of the things I did is I looked at, back to those rocks. Here's where the prices are. Here's where my budgets are. Here's the level of profitability I could achieve given that. And then I did some analysis. Well, what happens if I price 25% of my crop around these prices? And one of the things I found is that it greatly reduces the downside risk of meeting a bunch of targets. So that was one of the things I looked at and arrived at a percentage that I felt comfortable with. I don't think there's any set answer for all people. We do know, historically, the market tends to build risk premium in the spring. And I what I always say is it's probably not sensible to just sell all of your crop at harvest, and it's probably not sensible to sell all of your crop before harvest. So truth lies somewhere in between, and averaging it in over the growing season, those points where there tends to be market uncertainty built in. Of course, why is that uncertainty getting built in the spring in July? Because it may not rain, or we may not get the crop plant. If we don't, the prices are going to go a lot higher. So just because historically those have been the highest prices doesn't mean that they always will be. And so we always have to use that kind of understand, go back to the business basics of your operation. Are these prices that are profitable? Are these prices that remove enough downside risk? Are these prices that give me a good chance to achieve my long-term financial goals? And that's what I really like to focus on.
And Brent, just to add on that, I think we got to think about the game a little bit. I think it's more about getting hits that get us on base, right? And not hitting the home runs. And I think that if we change that mindset just a little bit, we got to look at each opportunity. Is this going to help me meet those goals, and not necessarily trying to hit for those home runs? And, Rebecca mentioned that it's all about averaging, right? We got to make sure we're making good decisions, and we got to keep applying that. And we're going to miss sometimes, or we're going to miss the top sometimes, but can we put in practices that also help us avoid these doomsday outcomes? Because if you're trying to hit home runs in baseball, you're either going to hit a home run or you're going to strike out. That might not be the best marketing plan for us, for our operations. So we got to think about how can we do it in a way that helps us get on base and take advantage of opportunities that present themselves.
Well, I think the hardest part as a producer has been, like, the last few years, the guys who have consistently forward marketed haven't really been the winners. So then you almost start to second guess yourself, like, well, is it even worth it? Do I just always wait till harvest now? I mean, I have that talk with a lot of producers who have been really good marketers, and the market hasn't rewarded the guy who has gone out and made some early sales. And who's to say 2021 will be the same way? So it's just kind of sticking with that, making a plan, sticking with it, knowing that some years is going to be great and some years it isn't.
Yeah. I have a question here about what's the best route for finding a market advisor? I could use some advice on when to sell. What's the best route for finding a market advisor? I think it's really important when you talk to the advisor that they understand what your business basics are. So what are the price levels that are going to work for you, and what won't work for you? What's the risk? How much risk are you willing to take? Kind of that they have a good understanding of what your situation is. They're making recommendations for you. So you need to make sure that those recommendations fit your situation. If they don't want to take the time to understand that or don't want to focus on that, then I think that's somewhat of a red flag to me. How does a grower incorporate marketing advice from a professional advisor, such as daily emails, into his own marketing plan? And this gets into more of that idea of, the stuff we all like to talk about. I mean, we could sit here and talk about, the market situation today, headed into the prospective plannings report. We could talk about that for a long time. It's really fun and engaging to do. But I think we have to take that kind of daily commentary, put it back in the context of what are our long-term goals? Are these prices that work for us or not? Can I afford? Yes, I feel bullish right now. Given the situation of my marketing plan, can I afford to wait for that next pitch to swing and try and hit that home run?
I think we've got to also think about, where that advice might fall short, right? Thinking about both of these. There are some farm level things that market advisor might not be able to help you with, that you have to realize that, okay, their advice is about this, but I have these needs or these constraints or these logistical barriers or these basic elements that I have to address. And so I think it's also helpful to realize, where is this advice maybe going to not be helpful, or what do I need to supplement this with for my own operation to make sure I get a full comprehensive jar of water, sand, and rocks.
There was a comment in here I think is really important, about crop insurance not all being created equal. And it was talking about the harvest price option in the context of 2012. I think, Rebecca, you wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so all of the producers I work with have the harvest price. It's not something that we even discuss not having, because you can take the harvest price off, or you can buy just yield protection. But like I said, 100% of the producers I work with are going to be having that harvest price. So, but it is something that is out there, and it is something that others didn't know they had in 2012, and it kind of made a reckoning, so to speak.
Right, and that's a good point. It's one of those things you don't want. The wrong time to find out what's in your insurance policy is when you've had a loss, right? Whether it's a property insurance policy or a crop insurance policy, we want to know what that policy says going into it, so we're aware of the risks we're taking. The harvest price option is a good example of that. That's the option that if prices increase at harvest, you get the higher of the harvest price or the base period price, the pre-plant price. That comes at a cost, right? Because they have to charge for that. But if you don't understand what you've got in your policy, you just want to pick the cheapest one, you might pick that. So not saying it's wrong to not pick it or pick it. It has to meet your needs, and you want to think through what coverage you have.
And that's one of those rocks, right? That's a business basic that plugs into that business model. Either you have it or you don't, and you need to know that, and you need to put that in your marketing plan. That way you remind yourself every year, like, have I changed my crop insurance? Have I changed my risk management program in some way? And that could be something that helps you update as you move forward.
Here's an interesting one. What type of marketing strategies should I be investigating, or are there underutilized strategies that maybe people aren't taking advantage of?
I'll just share my bias. I think some of those, they cost money, right? But I think sometimes these programs that help you sell so many bushels over a time frame is sometimes an interesting strategy. Take some of that risk off the table. It's this averaging idea that we've talked about, that Rebecca brought up, that we've talked about a lot. They have pros and cons, and you need to look into them a lot, but it's maybe something that someone you might be selling grain to or livestock to might have as an option to you. But I always find those to be an easy way to get some bushels sold, to get some sort of a base level of sales in that kind of takes some of the pressure off. Knowing my bias, because I won't pull the trigger, right? And then all of a sudden I got to sell a lot of grain in a short time frame. But if I put some of these over here, where either some sort of automated process is selling them for me on an averaging basis, I think that sometimes adds a lot of help to my thinking process. Like, okay, I am selling some grain, right? Maybe I'm not actively selling it, but I am marketing some grain as we go through here.
Right. It's kind of a self-imposed discipline, right? Anybody could go and sell grain on a certain day of the week at the same time. You could all do that, but we won't, because we're humans and people don't behave like that. So by doing that, you get that kind of guarantee that it's going to get done. And so I think those are interesting. The other thing I would tell people is that one of the things I think is often underappreciated in marketing is the role of basis. And we often talk about price levels on the Board of Trade and forget about changes in basis. And, from back to my professor days, we used to always say, that basis was of futures prices and the things that make up the cash price, the futures price and the basis, the one that was predictable statistically tended to be basis, not the futures price. So it tends to tell you, hey, you ought to pay some attention to basis and really watch it and try and manage it aggressively. So I think that's one of the things I would encourage people to look at pretty closely is the basis.
I would also say this sounds very elementary, but put your offers in, because a lot of offers hit on the overnight and then it's kind of off the table. Like, if I say I'm going to sell 5,000 bushels for $4.75 and I call up and that's what I do, then at least if it hits, I have it in, because it could very well hit. And if you set that price, it's maybe at an unemotional time and then it's done.
That is a great piece of advice, because I play in that, right? Like, oh, I'd sell a $4.75, right? And then you get busy, and that market give you that opportunity for maybe an hour or half a day, and you were doing something else. And I always use the example about, the market usually gives you some premium right after planting, sometime in June or July, but that's also the busiest time on the farm, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. And I think that's just a really good advice. You make that decision in a good headspace, and then you don't have to sort of chase the market and be constantly hooked into it to sure you jump in on that. You're sort of letting the decision carry itself through. Let the decision execute itself.
Thank you. So that'll do it for another episode of Two Economists and a Lender. Thank you, David, Brent, Rebecca, for leading today's conversation. And for you in the audience, thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you online again next month.